Long-standing uprisings that have brought down leaders from Lebanon to Iraq have largely left the streets as COVID-19 stifles public life. But that hasn't stopped protesters from pursuing political. It only took 2 days before small demonstrations surfaced in the suburbs of Lebanese cities in defiance of the coronavirus. In Beirut, protesters flouted the curfew, yelling, "We want to eat, we want to live." In Tripoli, Lebanon's second-largest city, protesters took to the streets in cars and scooters, shouting, "Dying from the coronavirus is better than starving to death." For many activists across the region, giving way to the pandemic isn't until the end. In Iraq, more than 770 people have contracted the virus, including at least 54 who have died due to complications caused by the disease. Authorities have enacted a nationwide lockdown as part of containment measures to slow the spread of COVID-19. As a result, protest camps have thinned out across the country. The few protesters that remain maintain a rotating presence for fear that if they fully leave, it would spell the end. Several top officials have been infected and there are concerns the number of cases are higher than reported. The government has cancelled Friday prayers, but health workers have complained they are under-equipped. Iran has asked the International Monetary Fund for emergency funding. From North Africa to the Middle East, several Arab countries have witnessed mass protest movements bring down long-standing political leaders over. Saudi authorities banned international religious pilgrims early on, leaving the Grand Mosque's Kaaba in Mecca virtually empty. Other measures have involved sanitizing streets and mosques, closing schools and universities, an extensive travel ban and fines of up to 500,000 reals, Euro 120,000/$133,000, for people hiding health details. It has also locked down the Shiite minority area. In Cairo, hundreds of Egyptians tried to get certificates showing they have a clean bill of health after Saudi Arabia announced new travel. Although Egypt has only detected a low number of cases, more than 100 tourists returning from the country tested positive for the virus. Officials have limited sermons to 15 minutes and cancelled large public gatherings. Gatherings of less than 100 are still allowed, leaving visits to the Wailing Wall open. But Israeli authorities have virtually halted air traffic and out of its territory, and tourists are required to self-quarantine. The city of Bethlehem has declared a state of emergency, emptying streets usually teeming ahead of Easter. Israeli researchers have said they are close to finding a COVID-19. As Kuwaitis kept their distance at this makeshift testing center, the country entered a virtual lockdown, with the entire workforce given a 2-week holiday from March 12. In Sudan, the protests have given way to various political reforms, but little has changed in Iraq. All commercial flights have been suspended from Friday on, schools have been closed and gatherings at restaurants, malls and commercial centers. Iraq's protest movement has set up its own makeshift disinfection stations to counter the spread of COVID. Although Iraq is highly prone to the outbreak due to its proximity and close relations with Iran, protesters have been defiant, saying the government is elsewhere. Authorities have closed major public spaces and religious institutions have canceled. Author, Tom Allenson. If we leave Tahrir Square, the snipers and security forces will take over and the movement will end, said Al-Qasim Ahmed, a young Baghdad journalist who has helped articulate protesters' demands. Since October, more than 600 people have been killed, many of them during clashes with government. Before the pandemic, the Iraqi government had struggled to contain the widespread demonstrations against lack of access to basic services and the country's sectarian political. We have survived death, bullets and tear gas for 6 months, so we can wait another 6 months until Corona ends. Lebanon and Algeria, where until recently protesters remained on the streets calling. Protesters walk through a makeshift disinfection cabin on Tahrir Square in Iraq, with Iraq's public healthcare system strained by decades of sanctions and underfunding. The coronavirus is only further fueling grievances, with record low oil prices triggered by the global pandemic straining Baghdad's ability to pay its massive public sector. Iraqis face an even more uncertain. These problems will make people go out to these streets in bigger numbers than ever before. Before, society was divided between those who supported the protests and those who stayed home, but soon they will see why we are protesting and join us. Taking advantage of the epidemic in Algeria, The pandemic has also taken its toll on the protest. Authorities appear to have instrumentalized coronavirus-related restrictions to deliberately silence last year, mass demonstrations against corruption and the ruling elite led to the ouster of long-standing ruler Abdelaziz Bouteflika and a subsequent presidential election which was marred by. Despite the government's political concessions to protesters' demands, demonstrations were still staged every Friday until last month. Protesters in those countries have largely been driven away from public spaces due to fears of contracting the novel coronavirus, and as a result of government measures to curb. Iraq, like many other countries, has enforced a curfew to help fight the spread of the coronavirus. Algerian authorities not only banned public gatherings, they also took the opportunity to arrest several activists and journalists, including prominent opposition figure Karim Tabou and Reporters Without Borders RSF correspondent Khalid Jarimi. RSF and other press freedom groups said they regret that the Algerian authorities are taking advantage of the coronavirus epidemic to settle scores with independent journalism. But the arrests haven't stopped the movement. In a video featuring prominent Algerian activists about the novel coronavirus, one figure raised a placard that read, "Protect yourself so that terror evolution has a future. To be free, you have to live," said another activist. Every evening, DW sends out a selection of the day's news and features. Sign up here. Activists say Iraq's political system is the real virus, without an apparent cure. Political deadlock, violent repression and decades of corruption all outweigh fears of a transfer of coronavirus from Iran. April 3, 2020, nothing is going well in Iraq. The population is poor, the political class is corrupt. Young people are rising up and there could be one big loser, writes Rainer Hermann of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. 03.120. 2019, public health authorities have locked down war migrant camps after residents tested positive for the novel coronavirus. Read more. Lebanon, from the penthouse to the outhouse. Lebanese authorities implemented restrictions on public life in late March. Rights groups have called on Athens to move migrants from squalid island camps to the mainland. The reality of the coronavirus pandemic has reached American shores. Numbers of infections and deaths are rising rapidly, while public health officials struggle to equip hospitals with it. Reuters news agency has been fined and suspended from Iraq after reporting that the official numbers of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the country were not. The agency says it will continue to report on Iraq. Including a curfew aimed at preventing large gatherings. They demolished the main protest camp at Martyrs Square in Beirut, clearing out a core group of about 60. The camp had served as a hub for the protest movement's political